Okay, I've chosen a selection from Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. It was published first, I believe, back in 1952, and it is one of the great pieces of American literature. I used it many times in my classes. I taught courses in immigration history, but also eventually a seminar on immigrant and ethnic literature. And that was always a kind of a centerpiece for ethnic writers from various ethnic groups. And the passage that I'm going to read takes place in New York. Invisible Man was born in Alabama. He wins a speech contest that gives him a scholarship to Tuskegee Institute, where he comes in contact with its leader, who was a devotee of its founder, Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington, at least according to Invisible Man and many who examine his work, was kind of the Uncle Tom of the most prominent Uncle Tom of his era. And so in his section on Tuskegee, it is a tremendous section of the book. Invisible Man eventually gets thrown out of school, sent to New York with a letter that was going to get him, open doors for him. And the letter turns out to be a completely fraudulent letter and destroys his career. But he's now in New York, and he's in the same position in New York, looking at this as an immigration historian, as Italian peasants or the peasants from Eastern Europe. He has spent his whole life in rural America, cut off from all of the skills, the education necessary to make it in modern industrial urban America. And so he's taking a walk, and he comes across quite an incident. I almost stumbled over it. It was piled in a jumble along the walk and over the curb and into the street, like a lot of junk waiting to be hauled away. Then I saw the sullen-faced crowd looking at a building where two white men were toting out a chair in which an old woman sat, who, as I watched, struck at them feebly with her fists. A motherly-looking old woman with her head tied in a handkerchief, wearing a man's shoes and a man's heavy blue sweater. It was startling. The crowd watching silently, the two white men lugging the chair, trying to dodge the blows, and the old woman's face streaming with angry tears as she thrashed at them with her fists. I couldn't believe it. A sense of foreboding filled me, a quick sense of uncleanliness. "Leave us alone," she cried. "Leave us alone," as the men pulled their heads out of range and sat her down abruptly at the curb, hurrying back into the building. What on earth? I thought, looking about me. What on earth? The old woman sobbed, pointing to the stuff piled along the curb. "Just look at what they're doing to us. Just look." Looking straight at me. And I realized that what I'd taken for junk was actually worn household furnishings. "Just look at what they're doing," she said, her teary eyes upon my face. I looked away, embarrassed, staring into the rapidly growing crowd. Faces were peering sullenly from the windows above. And now, as the two men reappeared at the top of the steps, carrying a battered chest of drawers, I saw a third man come out and stand behind them, pulling at his ear as he looked out over the crowd. "Shake it up, you fellows, shake it up. We don't have all day." Then the men came down with the chest, and I saw the crowd give way sullenly. The men trudging through, grunting and putting the chest at the curb, then returning into the building without looking either direction. "Look at that," a slender man near me said. "We ought to beat the hell out of those paddies." I looked silently into his face, taut and ashy in the cold, his eyes trained upon the men going up the steps. "Sure, we ought to stop them," another man said, "but we ain't got much nerve in this whole bunch." There's plenty of nerve, the slender man said. All they need is someone to set it off. All they need's a leader. You mean you don't have the nerve? Who, me? Who, me? Yeah, you. Just look, the old woman said. Just look, her face still turned toward mine. I turned away, edging closer to the two men. Who are those men? I said, edging closer. Marshals or something. I don't give a damn who they is. Marshals, hell, another man said. Those guys doing all the toting, they ain't nothing but trustees. Soon as they get through, they'll lock 'em up again. I don't care who they are. They got no business putting these old folks out on the sidewalk. You mean they're putting them out of their apartment? I said. They can do that up here? Of course, he's come to New York, the land of promise, from Alabama, where there wasn't much promise. Man, where are you from? He said, swinging toward me. What does it look like they putting them out of a Pullman car? They being evicted. I was embarrassed. Others turned to stare. I had never seen an eviction. Someone snickered. Where'd he come from? A flash of heat went over me, and I turned. Look, friend, I said, hearing a hot edge coming into my voice. I ask a civil question. If you don't care to answer it, don't. But don't try to make me look ridiculous. Ridiculous? Hell. All Scobos is ridiculous. Who the hell is you? Scobo's kind of a slang. It's a slang that a less educated person might use when talking to a more educated person, indicating he's a pretty stupid person. And remember, Invisible Man has just been expelled from college, so he's more educated, he uses more educated language. Never mind who I am. I am who I am. Just don't beat your gums up at me, I said, throwing him a newly acquired phrase. Just then, one of the men came down the steps with an armful of articles. And I saw the old woman reach up, yelling, "Take your hands off my Bible!" And the crowd surged forward. The white man's hot eyes swept the crowd. "Where, lady? I don't see no Bible." And I saw her snatch the book from his arms, clutching it fiercely and sending forth a shriek. They can come into your home and do what they want to you, just come stomping in and jerk up your life by the roots. But this here's the last straw. They ain't going to bother with my Bible. The white man eyed the crowd. "Look, lady," he said, more to the rest of us than to her. "I don't want to do this. I have to do it. They sent me up here to do it. If it was left to me, you could stay here till hell freezes over." "These white folks, Lord, these white folks," she moaned. Her eyes turned toward the sky. "Don't tell me. It's all the white folks, not just one. They all against us. Every stinking low-down one of them." "She's right," a hoarse voice said from the crowd. "She's right. They all is." Something had been working fiercely inside me. And for a moment, I had forgotten the rest of the crowd. Now I recognized a self-consciousness about them, as though we, were ashamed to witness the eviction, as though we were all unwilling intruders upon some shameful event. And thus we were careful not to touch or stare too hard at the effects that lined the curb, for we were witnesses of what we didn't wish to see. Though curious, fascinated, despite our shame, and through it all, the old female, mind-plunging, crying. I looked at the old people, feeling my eyes burn, my throat tighten. The old woman's sobbing was having a strange effect upon me, as when a child, seeing the tears of its parents, is moved by both fear and sympathy to cry. I turned away, feeling myself being drawn to the old couple by a warm, dark, rising whirlpool of emotion, which I feared. I was wary of what the sight of them crying there on the sidewalk was making me begin to feel. I wanted to leave, but I was too ashamed to leave. It was rapidly becoming too much a part of it to leave. I turned aside and looked at the clutter of household objects that the two men continued to pile on the walk. And as the crowd pushed me, I looked down to see, looking out of an oval frame, a portrait of the old couple when young seeing the sad, stiff dignity of the faces there, feeling strange memories awakening that began an echoing in my head, like that of a hysterical voice stuttering in a dark street, seeing them look back at me as though, even then, in that 19th century day, they had expected little, and this with a grim, unillusioned pride that suddenly seemed to me both a reproach and a warning. My eyes fell upon a pair of crudely carved and polished bones, knockin' bones, used to accompany music at a country dance, used in black-faced minstrels, the flat ribs of a cow, a steer, a sheep, flat bones that gave off a sound when struck like heavy castanets. Had he been a minstrel? Or the wooden block of a set of drums, pots and pots of green plants were lined in the heavy snow, certain to die of the cold. Ivy, canna, a tomato plant. In a basket, I saw a straightening comb, switches of false hair, a curling iron, a card with silvery letters against a background of dark red velvet reading, "God bless our home." And scattered across the top of a chiffonier were nuggets of High John the Conqueror. That sent me to the dictionary. Chiffonier is a chest of drawers with a mirror usually on top. And the High John the Conqueror is a plant that is well known throughout Africa and the West Indies. And it's believed by African Americans and West Indians that its ingredients are magic and can bring good luck. So there on the chiffonier is some High John the Conqueror, a lucky stone. And as I watched, the white men put down a basket in which I saw a whiskey bottle filled with rock candy and camphor, a small Ethiopian flag, a faded tintype of Abraham Lincoln, and the smiling image of a Hollywood star torn from a magazine. And on a pillow, several badly cracked pieces of delicate china, a commemorative plate celebrating the St. Louis World's Fair, that was in 1904. We're in the 1930s of America now, in the midst of the Depression. I stood in a kind of daze, looking at an old folded lace fan studded with jet and mother of pearl. The crowd surged as the white men came back, knocking over a drawer that spilled its contents in the snow at my feet. I stooped and started replacing the articles, a bent Masonic emblem, a set of tarnished cufflinks, 3 brass rings, a dime pierced with a nail hole so as to be worn around the ankle on a string for luck, an ornate greeting card with the message, "Grandma, I love you," in childish scrawl. Another card with a picture of what looked like a white man in blackface, seated in the door of a cabin, strumming a banjo beneath a bar of music, and the lyric, "Going back to my old cabin home." A useless inhalant, a string of bright glass beads with a tarnished clasp, a rabbit foot, a celluloid baseball scoring card shaped like a catcher's mitt, registering a game won or lost long ago, an old breast pump with a rubber bulb yellowed with age, a worn baby shoe, and a dusty lock of infant hair tied with a faded, crumpled blue ribbon. I felt nauseated. In my hand, I held 3 lapsed life insurance policies with perforated seals stamped void. A yellowing newspaper portrait of a huge black man with the caption, "Marcus Garvey deported." I turned away, bending and searching the dirty snow for anything missed by my eyes, and my fingers closed upon something resting in a frozen footstep, a fragile paper coming apart with age, written in black ink, grown yellow. I read, "Free papers. Be it known to all men that my Negro primus provo has been freed by me this 6th day of August 1859. Signed, John Samuels, Macon, Georgia. I folded it quickly, blotting out the single drop of melted snow that glistened on the yellowed page, and dropped it back into the drawer. My hands were trembling, my breath rasping as if I had run a long distance or come upon a coiled snake on a busy street. It has been longer than that, further removed in time, I told myself, and yet I knew it hadn't been. I replaced it in the drawer. Replaced the chest of drawer in the chest and pushed drunkenly to the curb, but it wouldn't come up. Only a bitter spurt of gall filled my mouth and spattered the old folks' possessions. I turned and stared again at the jumble, no longer looking at what was before my eyes, but inwardly, outwardly, around a corner, into the dark far away and long ago. Not so much of my own memory as of the remembered words, of linked verbal echoes, images heard even when I wasn't listening at home. And it was as though I myself was being dispossessed of some painful yet precious thing that I could not bear to lose, something confounding, like a rotted tooth that one would rather suffer indefinitely than endure the short, violent eruption of pain that would mark its removal. And with this sense of dispossession came a pang of vague recognition. This junk, these shabby chairs, these heavy old-fashioned pressing irons, zinc wash tubs with dented bottoms, all throbbed within me with more meaning than there should have been. And why did I, standing in the crowd, see, like a vision, my mother hanging wash on a cold, windy day, so cold that the warm clothes froze even before the vapor thinned and they hung stiff on the line, and her hands white and raw in the skirt-swirling wind, and her gray head bare to the darkened sky? Why were they causing me discomfort, so far beyond their intrinsic meaning as objects? And why did I see them now as behind a veil that threatened to lift, stirred by the cold wind in the narrow street? A scream, "I'm going in," spun me around. The old couple were on the steps now, the old man holding her arm. The white men leaned forward above, and the crowd pressing me closer to the steps. "You can't go in, lady," the man said. "I want to pray," she said. "Can't help it, lady. You have to do your praying out here." "I'm going in." "Not in here." "All we want to do is go in and pray," she said, clutching her Bible. "It ain't right to pray in the street like this. I'm sorry." "Oh, let the old woman go in and pray," a voice called from the crowd. "You got all their stuff out here on the walk. What more do you want, blood?" "Sure, let them old folks pray." "That's what's wrong with us now, all this damn praying," another voice called. "You don't go back, see," the white man said. "You were legally evicted." "But all we want to do is go in and kneel on the floor," the old man said. "We've been living right here for over 20 years. I don't see why you can't let us go in for a few minutes." "Look, I told you," the man said. "I've got my orders, and you're wasting my time." "We're going in," the woman said. It happened so suddenly, I could barely keep up with it. I saw the old woman clutching her Bible and rushing up the steps, her husband behind her, and the white man stepping in front of them and stretching out his arm. "I'll jug you," he yelled. "By God, I'll jug you." "Take your hands off that woman," someone in the crowd said. Then at the top of the stairs, they were pushing against the man, and I saw the old woman fall backward, and the crowd exploded. "Get that Patty son of a bitch!" "He struck her," a West woman screamed into my ear. "The filthy brute, he struck her." "Stand back or I'll shoot," the man called, his eyes wild as he drew a gun and backed into the doorway where the two trustees stood, bewildered, their arms full of articles. "I swear I'll shoot. You don't know what you're doing, but I'll shoot." They hesitated. Ain't but 6 bullets in that thing, a little fellow called. Then what you gonna do? Yeah, you damn sure can't hide. I advise you to stay out of this, the marshal called. Think you can come up here and hit one of our women? You a fool. To hell with all this talk. Let's rush that bastard. You better think twice, the white man called. I saw them start up the steps. I felt suddenly as though my head would split. I knew they were about to attack the man. And I was both afraid and angry, repelled and fascinated. I both wanted it, and I feared the consequences. I was outraged and angered at what I saw, and yet surged with fear, not for the man or for the consequences of an attack, but what the sight of violence might release in me. And beneath it all, there boiled up all the shock-absorbing phrases that I had learned all my life. I seemed to totter on the edge of a great dark hole. No, no, I heard myself yelling, black men, brothers, black brothers, that's not the way. We're law-abiding. We're a law-abiding people and a slow-to-anger people. Forcing my way quickly through the crowd, I stood on the steps, facing those in front, talking rapidly, without thought, without thought of my clashing emotions. We're a law-abiding people and a slow-to-anger people. They stopped, listening. Even the white man seemed startled. Yeah, but we're mad now, a voice called out. Yeah, you're right, I called back. We're angry, but let us be wise. Let us learn from the great leader whose wise action was reported in the newspaper just the other day. What man? Who? A West Indian voice shouted. Come on, to hell with that guy. Let's get this Patty before they send him some help. No, wait, I yelled. Let's follow a leader. Let's organize. We need someone like that wise leader you read about him. And down in Alabama, he was strong enough to choose to do the wise thing in spite of what he felt. Who, man? Who? That was it, I thought. They're listening. They're eager to listen. Nobody laughed. If they laugh, I'll die. That wise man, I said, you read about him, who when that fugitive escaped from the mob and ran to his school for protection, that wise man who was strong enough to do the legal thing, the law-abiding thing, to turn him over to the forces of law and order. Yeah, a voice rang out. Yeah, so they could lynch his ass. Oh, God, that wasn't it. But he was a wise leader, I yelled. He was within the law. Now, wasn't that the wise thing to do? Yeah, he was wise, all right. Now, get out of the way so we can jump this Patty. The crowd yelled, and I laughed in response as though hypnotized. But wasn't that the human thing to do after all? He had to protect himself because he was a handkerchief-headed rat. A woman screamed, her voice boiling with contempt. Yeah, you're right. He was wise and cowardly. But what about us? What are we to do? Look at him, I cried. Just look at him, an old fellow in a derby called out, as though he was answering a preacher in church. And look at that old couple. Yeah, what about Sister and Mother Provo, he said. It's an ungodly shame. And look at their possessions all strewn there on the sidewalk. Just look at their possessions in the snow. How old are you, sir? I yelled. I'm 87, the old man said, his voice low and bewildered. How's that? Yell so our slow-to-anger brethren can hear you. I'm 87 years old. Did you hear him? He's 87. 87. And look at all he's accumulated in 87 years, strewn in the snow like chicken guts. But we're law-abiding, slow-to-anger bunch of folks. Used to turning the cheek every day of the week. What are we going to do? What would you? What would I? What would he have done? What is to be done? I propose we do the wise thing, the law-abiding thing. Just look at this junk. Should 2 old folks be in such junk, cooped up in a filthy room? It's a great danger, a fire hazard. Old cracked dishes and broken down chairs. Look at that old woman. Somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother maybe. We call them Big Mama, and they spoil us, and you remember. Look at her quilts and her broken down shoes. I know she's somebody's mother because I saw an old breast pump fall into the snow. And she's somebody's grandmother because I saw a card that read, "Grandma, I love you." But we're law-abiding. I looked into a basket and saw some bones. Not neck bones, but rib bones, knocking bones. This old couple used to dance. I saw. "What kind of work do you do, Father?" I called. "I'm a day laborer." A day laborer. You heard him. But look at his stuff strewn like chitlins in the snow. Where's all his labor gone? Is he lying? No, he ain't lying. No, sir. Then where did his labor go? Look at his old blues records and her pots of plants. They're down-home folks, and everything tossed out like junk, whirled 87 years in a cyclone. 87 years. And poof, like a snort in a windstorm. Look at them. They look like my mama and my papa and my grandma and grandpa. And I look like you and you look like me. Look at them. But remember that we're a wise, law-abiding group of people. And remember it when you look up there in the doorway at that law standing there with his .45. Look at him, standing with his blue steel pistol and his blue serge suit. Look at him. You don't see just one man dressed in one blue serge suit and one .45. You see 10 for every one of us, 10 guns and 10 warm suits and 10 fat bellies and 10 million laws. Laws. That's what we call them down south, laws. And we're wise and law-abiding. And look at this old woman with her dog-eared Bible. What's she trying to bring off here? She's let her religion go to her head, but we all know that religion's for the heart, not for the head. What's she trying to do? There's nothing about the poor in head. What about the clear head and the clear of eye and the ice-watered vision who see too clear to miss a lie? Look out there at her cabinet with its gaping drawers, 87 years to fill them, and full of bric and brac, bric-a-brac. And she wants to break the law. What's happened to them? There are people, your people and mine, your parents and mine. What's happened to them? I'll tell you, a heavyweight yelled, pushing out of the crowd, his face angry. Hell, they've been dispossessed. You crazy son of a bitch, get out of the way. Dispossessed, I cried, holding up my hand and allowing the word to whistle from my throat. That's a good word. Dispossessed. Dispossessed. 87 years and dispossessed. Of what? They ain't got nothing? They can't get nothing? They never had nothing? So who was dispossessed, I growled. We're law-abiding. So who's being dispossessed? Can it be us? These old ones are out in the snow, but we're here with them. Look at their stuff. Not a pit to hiss in, nor a window to shout the news. And us, we're right with them. Look at them. Not a shack to pray in or an alley to sing the blues, and they're facing a gun, and we're facing it with them. They don't want the world, only Jesus. They only want Jesus, just 15 minutes of Jesus on the rug bare floor. How about it, Mr. Law? Do we get our 15 minutes worth of Jesus? You got the world. Can we have our Jesus? I got my orders, Mac, the man called, waving the pistol with a sneer. You're doing all right. Tell them to keep out of this. This is legal, and I'll shoot if I have to. But what about the prayer? They don't go back. Are you positive? You can bet your life, he said. Look at him, I called to the angled crowd. With his blue steel pistol and his blue serge suit, you heard him. He's the law. He says he'll shoot us down because we're law-abiding people. So we've been dispossessed, and what's more, he thinks he's God. Look up there, backed up against the post with a criminal on either side of him. Ah, Jesus and the two thieves, right? Can't you feel the cold wind? Can't you hear it asking? What did you do with your heavy labor? What did you do? And when you look at all you haven't got, in 87 years, you feel ashamed. Tell them about it, brother. It makes you feel you ain't a man. Yeah, these old folks had a dream book, but the pages went blank, and it failed to give them the number. It was called The Seeing Eye, the great constitutional dream book, the secrets of Africa, the wisdom of Egypt, but the eye was blind. It lost its luster. It's all cataracted like a cross-eyed carpenter, and it doesn't saw straight. All we have is the Bible, and this law here rules that out. So where do we go? Where do we go from here without a pot? We're going after that Patty, a heavyweight called, rushing up the steps, and someone pushed me. No, wait, I called. Get out of the way now. There was a rush against me, and I fell, hearing a single explosion backward into a whirl of milling legs, overshoes, the trampled snow cold on my hands. Another shot sounded above like a bursting bag. Managing to stand, I saw atop the steps that the fist with the gun was being forced into the air above the crowd's bobbing heads, and the next instant they were dragging him down into the snow, punching him left and right, uttering a low, tense, swelling sound of desperate effort, a grunt that exploded into 1,000 softly spat, hate-sizzling curses. I saw a woman striking with the pointed heel of her shoe, her face a blank mask with hollow black eyes, and she aimed and struck, bringing spurts of blood running along beside the man who was dragged to his feet now as they punched him gauntlet-wise between them. Suddenly I saw a pair of handcuffs arc, gleaming into the air, sailing across the street, and a boy broke out of the crowd, the marshal's snappy hat on his head. The marshal was spun this way and that, and then a swift tattoo of blows started him down the street. We're dispossessed, I sang at the top of my voice. Dispossessed, and we want to pray. Let's go in and pray. Let's have a big prayer meeting. But you know, we'll need some chairs to sit in and rest upon as we kneel. We need some chairs. Here are some chairs down here, a woman called. Sure, take everything. Take it all. Hide that junk. Put it back where it came from. It's blocking the streets and the sidewalk, and that's against the law. And we're law-abiding, so clear the street of that debris. Put it out of sight. Hide it. Hide our shame. Come on, men, I yelled, dashing down the steps, seizing a chair, starting back, no longer struggling against or thinking about the nature of my action. The others followed, picking up pieces of furniture and lugging it back into the building. We ought to have done this long ago, a man said. We damn sure should. I feel so good, a woman said. I feel so good. We rushed into the dark little apartment that smelled of stale cabbage and put the pieces down and returned for more. Men, women, children, seized articles, dashed inside, shouting and laughing. I looked for the two trustees, but they seemed to have disappeared. Then, coming down the street, I thought I saw one. He was carrying a chair back inside. So you're law-abiding too, I called out, but I only became aware that it was someone else, a white man, but someone else altogether. The man laughed at me and continued inside, and when I reached the street, there were several of them, men and women, standing about, cheering. Whenever another piece of furniture was returned, it was like a holiday. I didn't want it to stop. Who are these people? I called from the steps. What people? Someone called back. Those, I said, pointing. Oh, you mean those Ophes? Yeah, what do they want? We're friends of the people, one of the white men called. Friends of what people? I called, prepared to jump down upon him if he answered, "You people." "We're friends of all common people," he shouted. "We came up to help." "We believe in brotherhood," another one said. "Well, pick up that sofa and come on," I called. But I was uneasy about their presence and disappointed when they all joined the crowd and started lugging the evicted articles back inside. Where had I heard of them? And thus, Ralph Ellison introduces us to the brotherhood. These were white people that came up to help the blacks. And the whole next section of the novel deals with his involvement with the brotherhood. The brotherhood was, of course, the Communist Party, which was very active in black-white issues in the 1930s. Thank you.